It's time to live life through the eyes of fit people so that you too can live a fit life yourself. This is Fit Because. I'm one of your hosts, Jennifer Zerling, but you can call me Jay-Z. I'm a fitness and age management expert, author, speaker, as well as an international health advocate.
And I'm your other host, George Veter. I'm an entrepreneur, cattle rancher, fitness enthusiast, and a 6-time rodeo champion who has a huge amount of knowledge to share with you in the area of self-improvement.
Oh, he does. Get ready to learn how to bridge the gap between knowing what to do and doing what it takes to become physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and financially fit.
You ready, Jay-Z?
Oh, I'm ready, George.
Let's dive in.
And we're back again. We've got this great episode ahead of us, managing risk in life, risk-reward relationships, and how cool is that we're going to ask you all who are listening or watching this podcast to be vulnerable to earning more in your life by just adopting a more risque personality.
Yeah.
So we're going to give you some great tools on that and dive into the benefits of owning that risk.
Yeah. Well, I think, everybody is familiar with the term risk-reward relationship, right? That you can't have something great happen in your life without risk. Certainly in the investing world, we hear that all the time. We have to assess our risk-reward tolerance, right?
Yes, that's huge.
Yeah. Because we have to go we have to invest in ourselves. Whether we're talking about investing, literally with stocks, bonds, real estate, and stuff like that, or investing in our education, or investing in our career track, or investing in a relationship, or investing, whatever we put ourselves into, we have to do that weighing of how much risk am I taking here? What's the downside potential? What am I willing to possibly suffer, right? If things don't go as planned. And then really focus on the reward, right? Spend more time on the reward than the downside possible risk, but you have to weigh both. And to have a happy, fulfilled life, I think we all need to give this some thought. That's why we thought we'd bring it up today.
Yeah, no, this is an exciting topic. So, and I just had a conversation with a client yesterday. She's getting married and she's very upset about this whole wedding planning.
Yeah.
And her biggest fear is she loves the relationship as is. Her fear is everybody in this country is getting divorced, including her really close friends. And therefore, she's prone to getting a divorce too. So I said to her, well, what is it about this relationship that makes you feel like it'll end in divorce? She said, it's so great. Why would I want to change it?
Yeah.
And I said, well, did you ever consider that the people who get divorced never had a good relationship to begin with?
Right.
Didn't share the same goals potentially. I mean, you don't know all of the facts regarding those relationships. So to judge your life on other relationships just doesn't make sense. So after spending an hour, we were able to navigate through her fear and her taking that quote unquote risk of moving to that next level with her husband so that husband to be, so that she could, start a whole new life with this guy.
I totally relate to that. Probably most of us do, whether or not we've been divorced. If we've had failed relationships, right, that we invested ourselves into and then we're damaged or hurt when it didn't go the way we wanted it to go, that's part of a human experience, right? And then having the courage to dive back in and to be vulnerable. That's we can't be ultimately happy unless we're willing to accept that risk, right?
Right.
So, I think there's a lot of areas that we could talk about that we probably have in common. Relationships, definitely. There's a risk-reward scenario there, right? That probably anybody that would listen to this, and certainly us and in this room, we can relate to that. But also, I think it's true in life and whatever we venture, the risk that we take. I've always thought that when the things that we wish, if there was no possibility of failure, if we consider and do possibility thinking, we just write down paper, what would we do? What would we tackle? What would we attempt if there was no downside possibility? If we were emboldened by removing the risk, what could we be? What could we do? And if we then we find out who we really are, right?
Yeah.
The things that move us, the things that we deeply feel passionate about. All of us are sent to earth. My faith is all of us are sent to earth with gifts and things that we're supposed to do in this world, right? That we have destiny.
Mm-hmm.
I've always felt like that. Like I was sent here to do certain things, and I have a sense of urgency. So I'm never tempted to disengage from that.
No.
It morphs as I evolve as a human. I want different, bigger things than I did when I was younger, but the sense of destiny is still there, and hopefully it is until I leave planet Earth, right?
With you, it will be for sure.
And I think when we get to that moment, and in business, I deal with older people, and I have a certain number of clients that pass away every year. It's just the nature of it, So, which has helped me grow as an individual because I go through that process with people. That's real life, right? I see people that I develop a relationship with, that I care for, not just on a professional level, but as a human, as a friend.
Yeah.
I see them get sick and I see them die. And
Must
I
be tough.
deal with their loved ones, right? That's part of just the reality of my business.
Mm-hmm.
I think that regret, which is what we don't want to die with, is a life full of regret. It is typically reserved for the risk that we didn't take,
Mm-hmm.
not the risk that we did.
Right.
So at the end of our timeline here that we have, right, our window of opportunity to be what it is that we can be, we have to be willing to take risk. And I think the more risk is well thought out, we don't just, throw ourselves off a cliff risk, but well thought out, planned out, and then move into things that scare us a little and excite us a lot, being willing constantly to push ourselves and to accept more risk as competencies grow.
Yeah.
Is necessary for us to feel like we did what we were sent here to do. Les Brown, who's a motivational speaker, I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's a really fun guy to listen to, but he says the place on earth that holds the most treasure is the graveyard. All these people that are in the graveyard that died with their music still in them, with their treasures that were never unleashed because they were scared to fail. And they were too focused on the risk and not the reward.
Right.
And so they just didn't do it. Whatever they were sent here to do, they just didn't do it. So there's so much wealth that's buried with them of potential. And he said, and this is another thing that he said that really impacted me. I think about when you are on your deathbed, he believes, like everybody's seen, the Christmas Story, right? Dickens. Is it Christmas Story? Christmas Tale?
You're the one with the quotes, dude.
I know,
you should know this. Is that what it is?
The Ghost of Christmas Past, the Ghost of Christmas.
Yeah.
That one. Yeah. Okay. I think it's a Christmas Tale. Anyway, the famous Dickens novel. Anyway, if you remember, you have Ebenezer Scrooge. That's this guy that's a miser, right? And he won't spend any money, and he mistreats his employees, and he's just kind of mad at the world, even though he's wealthy, right? And he's just a miserable guy, and he goes to bed miserable and wakes up miserable every day, right? And then he has this life-transforming experience on Christmas Eve where these ghosts visit him, and they're actually ghosts of his present, his future, his past. And he gets glimpses of his life in perspective that he didn't have before, right? And he's the same human being, but he wakes up after this experience completely different, and he sees life in a different way. And now he's happy, and he can actually have joy in his accomplishments and his wealth, and he can start blessing people's lives, including his own. Anyway, Les Brown said that at the end of our lives, we're going to be sitting there, if we're cognizant as we get ready to pass through that portal of death, and there will be these ghosts that'll come to us. I'm your gift of whatever, and you didn't let me live. I was supposed to be this for you, and you wouldn't unleash me. All these ghosts of our potential, these ghosts of what we could have accomplished and could have been, that will come to us when it's too late. Now, I'm not saying that's the way it really happens, but I'm saying that I think that risk cripples, the fear of risk cripples our soul. So the goal for this podcast is for us to get emboldened by maybe looking at risk and risk reward in a different way and taking action that's inspired by the content of this podcast to make us happier humans.
Yeah.
And so that when we are at the end of our window of opportunity for accomplishment, that we can just be excited about the memories of those journeys we took because we embraced the risk of great achievement.
Of great achievement, exactly. In my most recent risk that I took, I remember, because, I'm an entrepreneur and I don't have a whole team behind me. I run my own business, Jay-Z Fitness. And 3 years ago, I wanted property, and we talked about this before.
Yeah.
And I just remember I was told by my tax attorney, or not tax attorney, but my accountant, saying, you got to write off less for your business. And I wasn't ever writing off a lot per se, but, I was growing my business at the time. So long story short, with what I was writing off, I didn't qualify for a loan. So for 2 years, I had to really mentally endure 2 years of writing off less, making less in the long run, making a lot of sacrifices, and to finally arriving December 19th of 2017, closing my first property. And, now everyone's coming up to me a month later saying, how did you do that? I mean, granted, you're doing really well in your business, but so am I. And I'm not, and the first thing I ask is, how's your write-offs? And they're like, well, I write off a lot. I said, well, stop that and give yourself a 2-year plan. And that scares people because it's forcing them to be uncomfortable. It's forcing them to take risk. I mean, people have a lot of bills to pay. We live in California. So if you want something really bad, I mean, I come from the mindset of nothing's impossible, but you got to be willing to do the work, and you have to have that mental perseverance to follow through. And then once you do it, I mean, on the other side of it, man, I live in this great property now and it's mine. I'm not renting anymore. And I mean, I'm sure you can, come up with multiple examples yourself, George, but man, it's like, how do we get people to click from that spot that I was at? I mean, because I was willing. But, when I'm talking to people about doing it themselves, they're like, yeah, I'm going to have to consider that. It's still that reservation of, taking that risk.
Yeah.
Where do they start?
Well, a couple things are, as far as things that have benefited me in risk reward analysis, is let's consider what the worst case scenario is, and let's deal with that.
Okay.
So if you're starting in business for yourself, because I've never had a safety net. I haven't had a W-2 since I was 18.
Wow.
I've always,
scary at first.
I've walked without a net my entire life. I've just created my own businesses and paid my own overhead and had employees and had to find a way to pay them. And as I've built, and overcome the tragedies that are natural in the learning curve of becoming proficient, right?
Right.
So I got that. But I always, very early on, business mentor told me that was his process. So I'm giving credit. It's a guy named Jeff Miles years and years ago. But he said he would do that in doing his risk reward assessment. He'd say, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen here? What if everything goes bad, so to speak? And my business fails. I don't get these sales that I need to sustain myself, et cetera, et cetera. What's going to happen? Mm-hmm. And then he said he'd build out the picture of what that looks like. Okay, well, what's going to happen? There's no debtor's prison in America, right? I fail. The worst possible thing, not that you ever want to shoot for that or even keep that as an option, right, in your own mind, but your business goes bankrupt. Well, so did Henry Ford's first business. So did Thomas Edison's. So does, right? That just means that the business plan was flawed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, am I going to have the courage to rebuild if the worst case scenario plays out? And then if in your mind, you go through that process and you say, okay, I think I could survive that. Then put that to the other side of the table and now focus on reward. Okay, now what if things go freaking right?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to make it go right.
Right.
Right? I'm going to learn my lessons. I'm going to be tough. I'm going to get up and I'm going to outwork my competition. This is what's going to happen. What's it going to look like if I do accomplish my goal on this risk reward analysis? And then get excited about that, right?
Yeah.
Get the picture, get clear, and move into it, right? So I think you have to weigh the downside, make sure it's acceptable, and then see yourself handling that and moving on and being able to absorb the risk. And then now move yourself into the positive side of the equation. What happens if it goes right? Now, I was not raised thinking that way.
Yeah, most people aren't.
My dad, who's deceased, so, and I don't want to say disparaging things about my dad, but he was a very negative thinker, super negative thinker. It was always about what could go wrong. It was always about, but this is risky, but this could happen, but this might fail, but this, and that just kept him, he inherited a ranch, a piece of property, and he ended up just piling on debt and debt and debt and debt and debt and having to sell stuff and then more debt and sell stuff and more debt. So being too conservative is like guaranteeing a loss.
Right.
You can't. So
you're going to be in that grave with 12.
I saw the other side, and that's why I think I am the way I am. I saw what it's like to live that way, to live in fear, to live just focusing on the risk side of the equation. And then I'm really kind of like the complete opposite of that. I've always, even to, I bloodied myself both, metaphorically and in reality many, many times, right? By taking risks that on paper I should not have taken, right? On the other side of the equation. But I think if you have to err on one side or the other, err on the side of being willing to take more risk, not enough.
Right.
Yeah. Let's do something with our life, right?
Yeah,
and let's learn and grow and survive and learn and grow and survive, right?
Yeah.
But that's the deal. And I think it's interesting. Here's an observation. I have a client that was born and raised in Yerevan, Armenia, when it was communist, okay? And he told me, and he came over here as an adult. He's a super good friend of mine. He's a dentist now here. And he told me, he goes, George, in a communist country like where I was raised, he said, everybody wants a government job. Nobody wants to be in the private sector because there's too much control, right?
Yeah.
Because the government, can take things away and restrict you, in a communist flawed system, right? Communism doesn't work, that's what history has taught us, right? Free enterprise works. And free enterprise is more alive and well today than it's ever been. Okay, so but in a communist country, if you have aspirations to be powerful and to do something big, you want a government post. Why? Because the government will support you, and you now are in the flow of bribes, because every communist system, works with bribery. You have to pay the government off to get things done, right? He said, in America, when he came here, he's been here for maybe 20 years. He said, when he came here at first, he said, nobody wanted a government job, so to speak. I'm not despairing government jobs, right? We need great people everywhere, and we certainly need great people in government. But to make big money, you need to be in the private sector, right? You need to be able to create your income, right? You can have it defined by what somebody tells you your position's worth, like in that type of situation. You need to be entrepreneurial. He said, but as the world seeks for safety, as we have more maybe challenge with entitlement attitude, right? Something for nothing. We want the reward, but we don't want to take the risk.
Right.
Then the free enterprise system gets in danger. And he says, and if the culture starts getting to where people are looking for the safe job instead of the risk for the great opportunity, then the fabric and the feeling of the country starts changing. And he says, I pray America doesn't get that way. I saw that happen in Armenia. So I think in our own lives, same thing. If we get too focused on what's safe, we're just trying to be safe all the time. Safe. Then we just stay restricted and we don't grow and stretch, and we can't have the experiences we need in order to evolve to what we can become.
Yeah.
We got to accept
and
risk.
It dims your light. It also makes you unhappy if you block your ability and your gifts and your talents.
Yeah.
So what can people do? Because there's a lot of people listening who are, in a corporation or, like work for the government or, are not entrepreneurial because they don't know where to get started. I mean, obviously being an entrepreneur is not easy by any means.
It's not for everyone. So I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
So I don't want to give that impression. Sometimes I'll say that because that's my thinking. I don't expect everybody to think like me, and they shouldn't. And thank goodness they don't, right? We need diversity.
But how can they unleash
But in their life,
talent?
okay, so maybe it's not vocationally for them. Maybe it's something else. Maybe maybe they aren't fulfilled in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That would be more of a challenge for me, right? I'm not scared to roll the dice and bet my, I've done that many, many times in my life.
Yeah.
I'm not scared at all to do that. And I ride bucking horses and rodeos, and I'll get on a wild horse that's trying to kill me in there,
Yeah.
And I put myself in that position constantly. And I've dealt with that, my whole sports life. So
any
that
other
kind of
relationship is positive then.
but relationally, it's harder for me, I've been hurt. Everybody's been hurt before. And it's harder for me to just take the risk, to just embrace what's in front of you. A therapist once told me, to be successful in a relationship, you have to be willing to receive the gift. And if someone's trying to give you their gift, their life, their gift, their devotion, if you don't receive that, then you are inviting unhappiness and you're refusing happiness.
Right.
And so for me, that's more of the challenge. I'm in a wonderful relationship right now. Wonderful. But I have to work at that more than all the other areas as far as the risk-reward relationship. That's the hardest for me.
Yeah. But the
for
fact
everybody's
that you
going to be
recognize
different.
that
I totally own it. No, I got it. I know what I am.
Yeah. But, Brene Brown is one of my favorites. I've discovered her a year ago. She's been around for a while. She did a whole study for 8 years on vulnerability. So one suggestion I make for people is to
some of her podcasts,
listen to the TED Talk, which is like one of the most viewed TED Talks out there on vulnerability alone.
Yeah.
And it's true stuff. You're like, oh my gosh, she's spot on. And her delivery is fabulous. But I think vulnerability with not only relationships, but with job, with, inner potential. And I think we talked about this in podcasts in the past about unleashing that feeling of shame, because I think that a lot of times growing up, some of us grew up in backgrounds where there was a lot of shaming. Like when I was in New York, I remember my father stopped me on the street one day and said, "When are you going to get a real job?" And that's when I was, my ambition was as an actor.
Yeah.
I was always working. I always had a job. I was extras. I was featured extras. I got my SAG card, which was virtually impossible back in New York back in 2000. And that was with like me just, killing the ground working and just, doing what I had to do and building relationships. But to have someone dim your light and just not trust in you and then follow that path. I mean, granted, looking back in retrospect, my acting background has gotten me confidence to be in front of huge audiences. And I didn't like the industry anyway, but that's a whole other talk. The fact of the matter is, if I could turn back time, like nothing would have stopped me to do something that I really loved. And that's why I take my career now so extremely seriously, that I love this so much. I would have my grandmother would tell me, this is about 10 years ago, why don't you get out of private industry and go work for the government? Because she did. She worked for the city of New York, and she gets a pension check, and she brags about that pension check. I get paid every month, and I will, to the day I die, I'll get paid. In private industry, you don't get that. And she doesn't understand that that's not for everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm, happy that it worked for her.
You're right. And we need those people.
Yeah. But we can't listen to those people as our truth.
Right. Exactly. So we all know what speaks to us, right?
Yeah.
All of us. In fact, we've had this discussion on previous podcasts as far as the starting point towards moving your life forward in any direction is defining exactly what you would like your life to look like, right? Yeah. In your heart of hearts, what do you feel you're made of? What do you feel is inside? What do you long for, right? What dream were you born with? If there was no chance for failure, what would you go out and get or do or be? So we have that conversation with ourselves and get clear about that. And then we do the weighing of the risk and reward and the downside. And then we're able to swallow that, and we tell ourselves, or we come to an agreement that we can handle that. If the worst thing happens, we can handle that, and we will overcome and rebuild from there. But we can live through that if that happens, so that we aren't in constant fear, or we don't keep stopping progress for fear of the risk, right? And then we just focus on core competency towards our goal, right? And we just focus on the reward.
That's right.
Whatever you focus on gets bigger. I had this conversation with a client yesterday who was just going through a divorce and kind of in a difficult situation. And I mentioned to her, I said, well, whatever you focus on gets bigger in your life, right? If you focus on the things that are not good in your life, that's what becomes bigger and more powerful and what influences you and your experience of life more. But if you minimize that and you focus instead on what's great about your life, because we all have good things, right? All of us have things to be thankful for if we will make those inventories. And then those things get bigger, right? Same thing with risk and reward. If all we're focusing on is the risk side of the risk-reward relationship, then we're scared all the time.
Right.
Right?
And who wants to be scared all the time?
Right. We handle the risk, we analyze it, we accept it, and then we move into the reward. And now we just think about the reward.
Right.
That's the deal. That's what you want. I guess obviously in business for myself, you risk failing. And sometimes I'll have moments, we're human, right? Where I get scared, that we have a difficult economic cycle or what have you. Something gets tougher, just whatever. Or you have a big client that you thought you were going to get that, doesn't close or whatever. You have something happen that you didn't want to happen, right? So you have a negative moment. And then you start, if you allow the fear or the risk obsession to take root, then I can start going down that road. I can say, oh my gosh, I've got 9 employees. I'm responsible for their families. I've got payroll to meet, right? In my particular case, I write a check every month for $110,000 just to make my work. That's before I make my first dollar.
Yeah.
Every month. That's what it costs me to run my business, which I generate. I'm 100% responsible for that, right? So when things get bad, I have a wonderful margin. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that if I allow that as my obsession and go down the road, what if this happens and I still have to do this? And what if this happens and then this still happens? And I can go down that road and terrify myself. I could make myself sick right now if I obsessed on the things that could go wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
But you wouldn't be where you are if you did that.
Right, but I don't do that. I do the opposite. I say, okay, now instead of worried about losing what I have, now I go, okay, I'm always starting over in my mind. If I was starting over today, this was my first day in business, and I have the cash flow I have right now to enjoy, and the client base that I have, and the skill set that I'd be the luckiest guy on planet Earth, right?
Yeah.
If I look at it like that. And now what can I build from here? What can I build from that, from where I'm at right now? See, I can scare myself to death, or I can empower myself and run through that freaking brick wall.
Yeah.
Just depending on how I view that risk-reward relationship, right? But what I'm saying is we all need to assess that.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of people that are going to listen to this podcast that could have a bigger life. And I'm not telling you need a bigger life. I'm saying that if there's something that would make you happier, I would love to support you in doing that.
Yeah, and you deserve to do that.
Right?
Yeah.
So we've got to get a handle on this risk reward deal. And we've got to stop the notion of, the other, I guess, visual you could have is, I don't know who said this, lots of people have said this probably, but the fruit is always on the end of the branch, right? The good fruit you have to walk out on the limb for.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want to eat.
Yeah. You have to step away from what's certain
and what's comfortable
to be blessed by what's uncertain, right? You can't hang on to one and grab the other. And so it's going to take mental energy, and you're going to have to talk to yourself and get yourself empowered and shift focus. And we're going to have that. That's a daily battle, folks. It never gets, it's never for free to be positive.
No.
It's something you earn.
And it's something you work on every single day. And I think to that point, you got to surround yourself with like-minded people so that you can feel empowered every day.
True that.
Can't be around people that are going to dim your light. I mean, it just doesn't work. And, a lot of time, it's funny because I'm having a birthday party in a couple of weeks. And my friend, Dr. Joe, who's hosting it at his house, said, he said, well, I said to him, you're going to meet the coolest people in the world. I have the best friends that I could ever even dream of.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I would expect nothing less from you. And then he said, and I'm sure they're even better than your family. And I'm like, well, why would you say that? He said, because we choose our friends. We choose the people we surround ourselves with.
Yeah.
And knowing you and the energy that you bring to me and to the world around you, it's so great and beautiful that I can only imagine great people in your life.
Right.
And it's true.
Right.
You know, every person I put on that list, I'm like, man, I can't wait to see them and give them a hug and have them celebrate with me. But if you're not saying that every day, then you're the only one who can change it.
Yeah. And choosing to be around people that have faced fears and worked through their fears to get something greater in their life.
Yeah.
I think it's Anthony Robbins that said fear, F-E-A-R, stands for false evidence appearing real. See, we're able to imagine a lot of unfounded fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's habitual. So we have to train ourselves how to think a certain way. So risk reward, we examine both. How great the potential opportunity is for the amount of downside risk that we have to accept to get the great reward, right?
Yeah.
We have to be able to come to an agreement with ourselves that if the worst case scenario plays out, we can live with it and rebuild from there, right? And then it has no power to stop us anymore once we come to terms there. And then we spend all of our focus on the reward and we move into the reward. And then we get around the right people and read the right stuff. And we continue to pound away at developing our core competencies that we identify that's necessary for us to have the bigger dream and the bigger life and the bigger happiness. Yeah. So let's take risk. Let's think about what we aren't doing because we're afraid. Let's reassess the risk-reward relationship. Let's go through this mental exercise that we described in this podcast, and let's do something bigger than we would have done without considering those concepts.
And you just defined mental, emotional, and spiritual fitness, George, which is the whole purpose of this podcast, Fit Because.
Yeah.
Excellence.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for your example, Jen. Always love these moments.
Thank you.
Awesome. Till next time.
This has been Fit Because, hosted by Jennifer Zerling
and George Veeder. Be sure to follow us on social media at Fit Because Show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
And for past episodes, be sure to visit our website at fitbecause.com.
Also, please subscribe to our show on iTunes and be sure to rate and comment. You may always request topics for our subsequent episodes.
And if you love this episode, please share it with someone you love so that we can continue spreading our mission to help people be fit.
Until next time, take care of yourself and know that your future is
Fit Because.